All right, welcome to the seventh episode of the Kentucky Elk Hunter webinar series. Just to start out, I want to say that we've gotten some really great feedback on a lot of these videos, and it means a lot to us to hear that from y'all. It means a lot to us that this stuff that we're putting out here is being watched and being used to prepare for your elk hunt. So we certainly appreciate that. Personally, I know this has been a fun project, and I hope that we'll only get better over time with some more practice. So either way, so for today, we're going to take a dive into rifle elk hunting. So this is for everybody with that week 1, week 2 bull rifle tag, and our cow hunters and our youth hunters. So I'm joined by Joe McDermott and Dan Crank, who you met last week. And Dan is on here. Dan's basically our resident firearms expert. I think I certainly take that for granted because any gun question that pops up, I'm one text away from getting the answer from Dan. So he's also taken a good number of elk with rifle over the years, as well as a bunch of other critters. So, but just in the interest of time, let's jump right into it. And Dan, you can share your screen now that I got that taken down.
Okay. Just load up here. Okay, so we're going to cover not really rifle hunting techniques, but more of how to set up your rifle, what kind of equipment you need, what you need to avoid, and some key things to look at, things to have with you, that kind of stuff. So really it's going to be more of an equipment type discussion that we're going to have today. So get this to work. Okay, so first we'll talk a little bit about proper rifle setup. Of course, you know, our state regulation says you have to have a rifle of 270 caliber or larger. So that's the first big thing you've got to look at is your rifle, you know, does it meet the requirements for for state regulations? So that's the big thing. Of course, most people are probably going to use a bolt action rifle. You know, there's many different things many rabbit holes we could go down there, but we'll just say that we're going to base most of this off of, say, a bolt action rifle setup, you know, Remington 700, Winchester Model 70, you know, Browning 8 bolt, something along those lines. So we're going to talk a little bit about scope selection, rings and bases, how to set up your rifle properly, and then proper mounting and scope adjustments. The one big thing that kind of a big mistake people make is you go out and you'll buy an $800 or $1,000 rifle. All right, you got a nice tool there set up, and then your next big purchase is a scope. Okay, what scope are we going to put on there? And a lot of people make the mistake of going out and, you know, go to Walmart, buy a $150 scope, throw it on an $800 rifle with some crappy rings on it, and they wonder why they can't hold zero with it. Or every time they go to the gun range, man, this thing's 3 inches high now. Well, the kind of the rule of thumb is spend as much or more on your optic than you spent on your rifle. Spend the money there. You want quality glass you can see through. You know, you want good turrets that are going to work. When you make an adjustment, it's actually going to move that far. And so don't make that mistake. Spend as much on your scope as you do on your rifle, and you'll be well ahead of the game here. So we'll kind of work through some of these. So rings and bases. See, these are some of the don'ts. Don't go to Walmart and buy the $5, $10 Weaver base and rings for your rifle. You're going to be sadly mistaken if you do. You're going to be not happy. So what we've got here, I just picked some of these images off the net. So you've got, this is kind of the old Weaver style base or set of rings. You've got only one bolt on each side holding that scope down. That's a weak point. These screws are fairly small. If you're not torquing these right up here, you're going to strip these out. A lot of times these cheap rings aren't aligned properly. They're not machined at a high tolerance. So you're going to clamp your scope in it and it may bend your scope. It may crush your scope. So stay away from single bolt rings, and they're just not going to be strong enough. And then these down here, these knobs, a lot of times these have a big, flat screwdriver on them. That's how you tighten them. It's not a good way to tighten things. You're probably going to strip that out. You're not going to get the right torque on it. This is another set of this style of ring. Weaver used to make these. I guess they still do. You used to find these at Walmart. It's not a very good setup. It does have the 2 bolts on the side. Some of the old Weavers actually had a hook on one side. It hooked, and you strapped it across your scope. You actually had to snap it on your scope to make it fit. And they were just very poor quality rings. They didn't hold the scope very good. They had really poor contact to hold your scope in their square. So stay away from this style ring unless it's a high quality ring, like from Leupold or someone like that. Basically, you get what you pay for. You pay $10 for a ring, it's not going to be very good. You pay $50 to $100 for a set of rings, they're generally going to be pretty good. And then bases. This is kind of a set of the old Weaver style bases that you could buy at Walmart. Generally, they're aluminum, which aluminum is fine if it's a high quality aluminum. They've got the small base screws, which is okay. But generally, this type of base is not what I would want to see. I want something that, more solid, maybe a steel base or a one-piece aluminum base, which is what we're going to kind of see here in a second. So those are kind of the don'ts. Now we'll go with. So this is kind of what I like to use. So you've got an aluminum one-piece Picatinny rail base. That's generally going to be, anywhere $50 and up at least. These are machined, so they're straight. They fit right. The screws are going to be, a good quality screw in them. You also have something like these over here. These are Tally one-piece bases. So you've got your base and the ring built into one piece. So that's one less part to fail, basically. You can see they've got 2 screws on either side of that ring to hold that scope in there squarely and tight. And then down here you've got more of a ring, 2-piece rings, which are going to clamp to your Picatinny rail. So you've got more options as to how to adjust your scope back and forth where you want to set those rings up. And then you'll see, you've got two screws on either side. You've got 2 screws at the base that are Torx head screws that are a lot harder to strip. They work better. If you look on this ring, you'll see it says 18 inch-pounds. Okay, so that's the tightness of those screws need to be. No more than 18 inch-pounds. And one thing I wanted to kind of illustrate was 18 inch-pounds isn't very much. You don't have to crank on these things and get them as tight as you can. A good rule to go by is if you take your Allen wrench that probably comes with your set of rings, all right, if you grab it up here, the short end, and you tighten your rings that way, generally you're only going to get about 15 to 20 inch-pounds out of that before it hurts too bad or you just can't twist it. Do not put it in there this way and get a big heavy hand on it and wrench it around there as hard as you can. You're going to strip those screws out. You're either going to strip the threads out or you're going to strip the head out. And now you've got a problem. You can't get your screw back out. The other thing is do you use Loctite or not? Do not ever use red Loctite on a rifle. And I mean it. Don't ever use it. Once you get it in there, it will not come back out. Without heat, it will not come out of there. And you've got to heat it up pretty hot. You've got to use a propane or sometimes butane will get it hot enough. Generally, all you're going to do is strip your screws out. And you're probably going to have to take it to a gunsmith to have them repaired and fixed. You can use blue Loctite. It will come back out. That's generally something you can use, and just a little tiny dab will do you. Just a little tiny drop. If you want to get yourself some more security to keep those screws tight, you can use those on your base screws and your ring screws. So that's something you can do, but don't ever use red Loctite. Bad idea. One thing about your scope adjustments. So how do you set up your scope and how do you adjust it? So I got a picture here of one of mine, and you see this, every scope is built like this. You look at the back of a scope, you've got that, sometimes that plus and minus is there, sometimes it's not, but that's a diopter adjustment ring. That's to adjust your eye to that scope. So the first thing you do with that scope is pull it out of the box. You can look at the ceiling. You can look at, a bright wall. You can look outside. You can look at the sky. Of course, don't look at the sun. But what you want to do is you want to adjust your eye to the lenses in that scope. So you screw that in and out, kind of look through your scope and close your eye, look through it and look at the reticle. If that reticle is blurry, you need to adjust that diopter. And you just kind of play with it. Close your eye, open it. Okay, I need to turn a little bit this way. All right, close my eye, open it. Do that until as soon as you open your eye, that reticle is clear. And for me, it'll be different than it will be for anybody else. A lot of us, as you get older, your eyes change. Younger people don't have much problem with it, but each individual, you need to set that. Because if you pull up your scope and it's maybe early day or late in the evening and you can't see real good and you can't see your reticle, you've got a problem. So that's the first thing you need to do. We talked a little bit about proper torque on your screws. Your base screws can be up to about 30 inch-pounds. You can get those a little tighter. Like I said, the ring screws about 15 to 20, depending on the manufacturer. And I showed you the little trick with the Allen wrench there. Proper eye relief. And that's one good thing with using that Picatinny rail and the rings that match that rail. Get down with your gun and play with the distance forward and backward where you want that scope set up. So you see a full clear image when you look through that scope. And it's probably best to do it low to maybe medium power if you have an adjustable power scope. And just keep looking through it and moving that scope back and forth, seeing where it needs to be. Try to get it as level as you can. And then once you get your eye relief set, you know where you need it, then you can tighten all your screws down. Like I said, we talked about thread locker. Another thing is your action screws in your rifle. Depending on the manufacturer and what kind of stock you have, if it's just a generic Remington with what we kind of like to call a Tupperware stock, it's just a plastic stock, you can't tighten those really hard. You'll damage that stock. So you probably don't want any more than maybe 30 inch-pounds. If you have a rifle that's set up with bedding and it has, aluminum pillars in it or some kind of chassis, you can crank those screws in there from 45 to 65 inch-pounds to really get that nice and snug in there so it doesn't move. So depending on the rifle, it depends on how tight you can get those screws. But generally it's 45 to 50 inch-pounds is what you want. Get those nice and tight and snug. And one trick about doing that, when you get your rifle, loosen those screws up so your action and barrel will move up and down a little bit. Set that rifle straight up with a butt on the ground or on the table or wherever you are. Make sure that barreled action is sitting back down in the stock before you tighten them. If that barreled action is forward in the stock and you tighten it down, the first time you shoot it, or maybe the 10th time you shoot it, it's going to shift all of a sudden because it's got space in there. And that will change your point of impact, believe it or not. And even changing the torque settings can change impact. So it's all about consistency with rifles. If you want a precision rifle, it has to be consistent across the board. Everything has to be good and tight. So generally that's where we want to start out from. So a good quality scope, attached with good quality rings and bases, use the proper torque settings on things, and that should get you started in the right direction. And make sure your scope is set up for you. That's the really big thing.
So you were talking about all the different inch-pounds and the torquing on there. One of the best things that I bought in the last couple of years is a fairly inexpensive like screwdriver torque wrench type deal. And that's just something I never had one. I was guessing on all this stuff for years. And, not only did it tell me I'd been cranking everything down too hard, it also lets me get, all the new rings have torque specifications on them. Just lets me know that I'm doing it right the first time. And that's something, there was one in Sportsman's Warehouse the other day for $30-40 that I saw that would be if you're fooling around mounting scopes, I think that's a good thing to think about.
Yeah, usually like the one you're talking about is probably the Wheeler Engineering fat wrench. It looks like it's a big yellow, it's kind of strange looking, but the fat wrench is a good one. I've used it a lot. It's fairly consistent. You want to make sure when you use those though, when you store them, back that setting all the way down to 0. If you keep it tight all the time, it can damage the spring in it and you'll get inconsistent settings. So always back those things back down to 0. You can also get like Fix-It Sticks makes some that are really nice. They're more higher end torque wrenches, but there's some other options out there. But that fat wrench is a good one to start off with. Like you said, you could find those at sometimes Walmart, Sportsman's Warehouse, Cabela's, Bass Pro. All those places have them. It's a really good investment to have. You can take it with you in the field too. We're going to talk about this a little later, but when you get down to hunt, you need to check all these settings again. Make sure everything stayed tight. So we'll talk about that later. But yeah, those fat wrenches are really handy to have. Yeah. All right, so now we're going to talk about bullet selection. And, there's so many different bullets on the market that it's almost bewildering. But there's some things that you need to look for, especially for hunting bigger game animals like elk, even moose and caribou, that kind of thing. But, for elk, we definitely want a heavy bullet that's going to hold together, that's going to penetrate, it's not going to fly apart, and it's going to fly straight and true. So we're going to kind of work our way through some do's and don'ts here as to what we're going to look for. So, bullet weight is, I can't tell you use a certain bullet weight because depending on the caliber you're using, it's going to differ. So we're going to get some general ideas as to what you need to look for. The other big thing is bullet design. There's all types of different bullets. You've got varmint, you've got light skinned game, heavy skinned game, heavy bone game. There's a lot of different options to look at, but we're going to kind of key in on just a few that'll tell you what to look for. The one thing, if you're buying a lot of ammo, or what I'm talking about with the mixing weights and lot numbers, is you don't want to go out, say you've got a 300 Win Mag. You go to Walmart and you buy 125 grain one of the SSTs, you go sight your rifle in. Okay, that's fine. And then you come down here to hunt, and all of a sudden you've got 212 grain ELDs in there. It's not going to shoot the same. The 0 is not going to be the same. So you can't mix these weights. You can practice with lighter game bullets. That's fine. But make sure you know your 0 is on for the bullet you're going to use. Don't go by, and you may have differences in lot numbers. You may go to Walmart, if you could find it today, and buy a box of 300 Win Mag ammo, come back 2 months later, buy the same type of ammo, same manufacturer, same bullet, same everything, different lot number. It may shoot completely different. It may be, you may be zeroed in at 100 today, you get a different lot number of ammo, it may shoot 1.5 inches high. They may have changed the powder formulation in it. They may have changed the primer in it. You don't know. So when you buy ammo, as much as it hurts, buy 2, 3, 4 boxes of it. Look at the box. It'll have lot number listed on the label somewhere, and make sure those lot numbers match. It's just more security, more consistency, like we're talking about, to make sure your ammo is what you want, and it's going to be predictable, basically. So we'll kind of go through some more things here. So kind of work through the incorrect bullets. All right. What we don't want is what you see in the picture here. We don't want a target bullet. We don't want a bullet that's used for varmint hunting, coyotes, groundhogs, that kind of thing. You see here, I've got a picture of ballistic tip bullet. You see it's got a fairly thin jacket, and it has that ballistic tip. Now, there are some bullets that are designed that look kind of like this, and they will work, but ballistic tips won't. They have that thin jacket, soft nose, which is made to penetrate into that lead core and make it basically explode. And then again, we look at proper weight. You don't, like I said, you don't want .300 Win Mag shooting 125 grain ballistic tips in it. You're going to shoot an elk and it's just going to explode. It's not going to go anywhere. And now you've got a wounded elk you're going to have to try to find. So look at the weight range of ammo. Most of our 30 cal bullets, you wanted something at least 180 grains. You can, sky's kind of the limit. You get up to like a 240, but you want at least 180 grain bullet is what you're wanting to look for. 270, you're probably going to be stuck with around 140 grain bullet, but you can find good quality bullets that will work in heavy game. So this is what you don't want to look for.
Yeah, and so a lot of when you're thinking ballistic tip, I mean, this is what I shoot for deer. I went out west on a pronghorn hunt and took a ballistic tip bullet. A lot of the stuff, some questions that I've got, these people are, if you go to the outdoor store and pick up something that's labeled for deer, it's likely to be, a thin jacketed ballistic tip type bullet.
Right.
And so that's something, and that's predominantly what probably our hunters that are deer hunters, that's probably what they're going to have in the closet is these ballistic tip bullets. And I think this is the most important, probably the most important thing that we're going to cover today is just getting that right bullet type. So, I'm trying to think of what's out there, Hornady, whitetail, there was Winchester XP. Those are marketed, there's a deer on the front cover of those boxes. Those are deer bullets and probably something to stay away from for elk.
Right. Yeah. And a lot that you'll see is it's marketed for deer. There's not a lot marketed for elk unless you really look for it. You're going to have to really pay attention, or like you said, you're going to end up with a box of ballistic tips, and that's just not going to work good for you.
I would also mention when we're starting to talk about this, I mean, I'm sure most of the people that are watching this already know, but we are in like a ammo crisis right now. It's something to start looking for now, especially in a place like Kentucky where we're going to have a more limited selection. I mean, I tried to buy an extra box of turkey shells just to have on me, and I tried to buy them 3 months before the season, and I was lucky to get what I got. So it's definitely something to think about there on that end too, which is part of the reason we're doing this video as early as we are.
Yeah, I actually got online yesterday. Buddy's looking for some 300 Win Mag ammo, and to be honest, I found very, very few places that I could buy it. The only place I found 300 Win Mag ammo was 180 grain Burger hunting bullet, and they were $66 a box. That's all I could find yesterday. All the cheap stuff is just gone. I mean, hopefully it'll come back here in a month or two, but who knows?
Maybe we'll get lucky and get a surge of new products in before hunting seasons, but everybody's going to have the same thing on mind. And like the archery talk that we did, if you wait until, a week, 2 weeks before the season to actually try to get this done, you might be sitting there without exactly what you need.
Yeah. People need to plan well ahead, especially right now. Is tight as things are, you need to get it yesterday, basically. Yeah. All right, so we'll work through what you need to look for. Get it to work here. All right, so this is what we want to look for. Now here you see kind of top right, that looks like a ballistic tip bullet, but it's not. It's a solid copper bullet with an expansion tip in it. So that bullet's going to hold together really well, even through heavy bone and heavy game. A lot of these, like the one at the bottom, it's the old stand by the nozzle partition. You see that's has that little bar across it down in the core of the bullet that keeps that bullet from expanding too far. So it retains a lot of that weight. So you want to look for a bonded core bullet, which we'll show some more examples of that here in a second. That basically means the jacket is a special process. They bond the jacket to the lead. So the lead has a harder time breaking free of that jacket when that bullet expands and it holds it together. Partition type bullets like the one at the bottom. They also have a Swift A-frame bullet is another really good one that's kind of built on the same concept. The solid copper expanding. You see that up top with that bullet. The Barnes X bullet is a really infamous bullet. There's some other companies that also make some solid copper bullets too. So, and like we mentioned earlier, you want to kind of go heavy for the caliber. You see, that's a 270 bullet, a 130. That's a nice bullet selection for 270. Down at the bottom, that 7mm, 100, I think it's 160 grain. So you're getting as heavy as you can get. Basically, you want a lot of energy in that bullet for stopping power to successfully take down a large animal. So.
Yeah, and I will say you've got an example of my exact setup is 7mm rim mag with a 160 grain Nosler partition. So, and it works, and they look, you know, the bullet I pulled out of a cow a couple years ago looked exactly like some of the photos you're going to show. It was perfect, you know, went all the way through and was up against the hide on the offside. So
Right.
It did its job.
Yeah, I mean they work. It's not propaganda. These bullets do what they're supposed to do. They're like with the scope in your rifle. You get what you pay for.
Yep.
You really do. Okay, so here's some examples of some of these different bullets. So you see the top left there, you've got the Barnes X bullet design. That's a solid copper. The Hornady Interbond, that's a bonded bullet. So that shows you kind of what that bonding process does. It keeps that bullet together. You got the partition, the A-frame, and then some kind of mix and match over here with a Trophy bonded with a tip in it. Has a little more copper in that bullet, holds it together a lot better. And a few more other bonded bullets. And the one thing to look at, see the Remington core lock. Now there's two different Remington core locks. There's the normal one and there's an ultra bonded one. So pay attention what you buy. You may find a 180 grain core lock 30-06 round at Walmart. That's not an ultra bonded, more than likely. That's just a regular deer bullet. I mean, it may work okay, but it's not that bonded bullet that we're looking for. And the Swiss Scirocco down the bottom right, it looks like a ballistic tip, but it's got a thicker jacket, a bonded core in it. So those hold together a lot better. So
Yeah, and the whole idea is that, you know, the bullet's going to hit mushroom at the end, like all these photos we're looking at. And then basically that back half is going to stay together, keep all that weight together, and just bomb through the rest of the elk.
right.
Whereas a ballistic tip on a whitetail, you're basically going for maximum mushroom, maximum destruction because they're small and they're thin skinned. You're going to get all the way through them. That you've got to have a bullet that will stay together and keeps doing its job while it travels, you know, maybe 3 feet through that chest cavity, depending on how you're lined up. And so these bonded bullets, I mean, that's what they're built to do.
Right. Exactly.
Not to keep harping on the ballistic tips too much, but one of the cow hunts maybe it's 2013, I watched a guy shoot a cow right in the shoulder broadside, and it basically just like threw a little grenade on the outside of her shoulder and never even went into the chest cavity. So then he had to deal with an elk who just kind of ran around with a wonky leg.
Yeah.
It had nothing to carry it in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll show some examples here of what you don't want. So this is what happens with a ballistic tip or a target bullet that's not built to shoot into game animals. You see that top left, basically a hollow point, thin walled bullet. It just explodes into pieces of shrapnel. You know, and like Joe said, you shoot an elk in the shoulder with that, it's not going anywhere. It's going to hit that shoulder blade and just explode, probably break the shoulder, but it's not going to take that elk down. And again, with the ballistic tip here on the right, you can see that thing just exploded. You see the core of the bullet came out of the jacket, so it probably took off flying in a different direction, you know, inside that animal. May not have went anywhere, but, you know, bullets like that are not going to penetrate. And when you're trying to shoot an elk that, you know, their chest is about 18 to 20 inches tall, it's probably 2 feet thick through them. That's a lot of space you've got to get through. And, you know, as in the archery, if you look at the archery video you guys did, you show how big an elk shoulder blade is. You hit that spine of a shoulder blade, and it's not going to go anywhere. That's like a big shield on their shoulder. And these lightweight, thin-skinned bullets are not going to penetrate. But you see that inner bond there at the bottom is, kind of an example of that bonded core again of what you want to look for. But so even though you may see that little ballistic plastic tip in that end of that bullet, make sure you look at the box and kind of know this nomenclature and what these bullets are, because you can look at 4 different rounds laying here. They all have got ballistic tips on them, and one of them may be a good cartridge, and the other 3 may not be. So just because that tip's there doesn't mean it's not any good. But so pay attention to that and make sure you don't use the wrong one. So. All right, so we're going to look at maybe some other equipment to take with you in the field. So we've got shooting sticks, bipod, lens covers for your scope. Make sure you bring a sling and extra ammo. And again, we need to talk about the same type of ammo, the same lot number, the same manufacturer, all that. Don't mix and match ammo. A good pair of binoculars, a rangefinder, and a cleaning kit. With the shooting sticks, a lot of times, here in the fall, generally the grasses here are going to be about waist high. So you're not going to be able to lay on the ground and get a good shot. And you may be out in the middle of an open strip job. There's no trees or rocks or logs to get a good setup on. You're going to have something that's elevated, at least waist high, maybe higher, something like either really tall shooting sticks or what's the one that Primos makes, the trigger stick?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that, a bog pod, something you can double these as walking sticks too. But make sure you've got something where you can get up off the ground and take a good shot. A bipod doesn't hurt to have. Throw it in your pack. If you can lay down and get a good prone shot, do it. It's a lot more stable position to be in. Of course, like the lens covers and things, that's just kind of protection to your equipment. Make sure you protect that $800 scope you just bought. You don't want to put a big scratch on it or get dirt in it or get water in it, and now you can't see through it anymore. So binoculars are always a good thing to have. That way, you've always can have a good look at things. Spotting scope, maybe keep one of those in the truck with you. A good rangefinder is going to come in really handy. When you get on a strip mine, a lot of times things are farther than you think they are. If you're not good at judging distance, and get a rangefinder. If something you think an elk is at 300, but it's at 500, you're going to miss. You may shoot it in the foot. You're going to make a bad shot. So take a rangefinder with you. Archery rangefinders will work just fine.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Just being a deer hunter that moved out to elk country years ago, they're bigger than you think they are, so you think they're closer. And that getting out just in the open country and seeing a mature bull elk, they're big. They're a lot farther away than they look when you've come from a history of deer hunting and looking at deer. So I don't hunt without a rangefinder, and I think it's a key piece of equipment.
Yeah, like I said, it doesn't have to be a big fancy one. A regular archery rangefinder that'll range good out to maybe 400 or 500 yards will serve you just fine. You don't have to go buy some big fancy one. The other thing I recommend people bring is get you a good little field cleaning kit. Nothing fancy, just a rod and some patches and a jag. Or, really the easiest thing right now is some of these ones that you just pull through your barrel. There's like the ripcord is one, the boar snake. Those are good little things to have. You get a little mud in there, at the end of the day, you can just run that through your barrel, pull it through, make sure you're good to go. Just something easy to have, because you don't want to get a barrel obstruction and you're out in the middle of nowhere, and now what are you going to do? Jam a stick in it? No, you're not going to do that. You get that stuck, now you've really got a problem. So just something simple as that. These things are like $5 or $6. Go to Walmart, pick you one up. There's caliber specific, but they work great. It's something you can throw in your pack and not have to worry about. All right, so now we're going to sight in that rifle. We've got a few things I want to talk about here. Basically, you have to sight in your rifle. Don't have your buddy do it. Don't have your dad do it. Don't have your cousin do it. You have to do it. Because I can shoot a rifle and John take it and he shoot it, it's going to shoot different. Joe gets it, he shoots it different. It may only be an inch or so here and there, but it's different. You have to shoot your own rifle. And the easiest way to do this, guys, is I can generally sight in a rifle with about 4 shots. If you're taking more than that, something's wrong. Get to wherever you want to shoot. Take the bolt out of your rifle. Set it up on bags, bipod, whatever you have. Look down the barrel and find something that you can identify. Maybe it's the top of a fence post, or look at a target. It can be 20 yards, it can be 50 yards, or you can do 100 if you can figure it out. Find the top of a fence post. Look through your bore. Line up the gun with the top of that fence post and the bore. Now raise your head up and look through your scope. And you can get it pretty close that way. Adjust your reticle so it's looking right where you're looking through the bore. That'll get you probably within 4 inches at 100 a lot of times. So it saves you a lot of time, a lot of ammo, especially now when you can't find ammo. Do that bore sight method. You can buy lasers and all this other junk. You don't need it. Take the bolt out of your gun, look through the bore, and look through the scope. And you can sight in a gun pretty quick. We'll talk a little bit more about point blank zero here in a second, but basically get it where you can hit a 1 inch circle at 100. That's where we have to start out. I think we've all seen guys show up at the range week before deer season. They put up a pie plate. They hit it twice. Yeah, I'm good to go, but the shots are this far apart. They barely can hit the pie plate. That's not good enough. You need to be more consistent than that. Most rifles these days should be able to shoot an inch to an inch and a half group at 100. If you can't do that, get out and practice. Heck, get a 22 and practice. Practice a 22 at 25 or 50 yards. That seems like a little bit far, but do it. You learn trigger control. You learn how to line your sights. You learn how to set up the gun for you to make good shots. But you have to have a good 0 to 100. Shoot from different positions. Once you shoot off the bench and get that good 0, shoot off the ground, get your bipod out, get your shooting sticks out, shoot at 50 or 100, shoot at 200 if you can. Don't just be stuck to that bench, and do not use like a lead sled type thing to shoot from. You can sight in a rifle with one of those lead sleds, and it'll be dead on, accurate 100, right through the bullseye. Take it out of that lead sled, and now it's 3 inches high and 2 inches left. Well, what happened? Well, that lead sled's completely different than you shooting it. The vibrations, the recoil, everything is different. That's why I said you have to shoot your gun the way you're going to shoot it in the field, and learn your limitations. And that comes from shooting these different positions. If you get your shooting sticks out, and you're shooting from your bipod, and you can hit a watermelon or whatever at 300 yards. Great. Now you get your shooting sticks out, you try that, you can't hit that thing if you had to. All right, well, you can't shoot 300 yards now. Back it up to 200. Learn what you can and can't do. Take that with you in the field, because, if you get down here and you see an elk at 400 yards, and it's the biggest bull you've ever seen, but you can't hit the broadside of a barn at 200 yards with that rifle, don't try it. Know what you can and can't do, and then stick to it. Be an ethical hunter. Next thing we're going to talk about is some ballistics. Looking at drop data and some energy requirements, what I kind of recommend for people to look for. So you got your rifle zeroed. You're good to go with different positions, your different equipment. You got your rangefinder working. So here's where we can alter our zero a little bit, depending on what kind of gun we have, what kind of bullet we're shooting, to get us better equipped for the field. So I pulled up this is off of the app off my phone. This is Ballistic. It was free. I'm not sure if it's still free or not. There's a lot of apps you get on your phone that do the same thing. Hornady has one, Hornady 4DOF. You can pay for them if you want to. There's a lot of them that you can buy. You can get on the internet, just search for ballistic computers. There's a ton of them on there. you can find a lot more stuff than you ever want to dream about with ballistic computers. But basically, you just want to be able to input, the bullet and the speed and all that for your cartridge. You can put in some weather conditions if you want to. Line of sight is important. That's how high your scope is above the bore of your rifle. That depends. That'll determine a lot. Usually it's about an inch to inch and a half most of the time. But so anyway, so we're looking at here is the same bullet fired out of a 30-06. So we zero on the left side here. You can see we zeroed at 100. All right, and this is inches of drop. So we zeroed at 100. At 200, we're dropping at 3.6. At 300, we're dropping 13.3 inches. Okay, so and you see this let me get it come back up. This red indication here. This is what we're calling point blank zero. So what you can do with these, I set this up so our target is a 10-inch diameter target, which is a pretty good kill zone to try to hit on an elk. It's a little bit bigger than that, but a 10-inch target is pretty good. So what it does, it takes the radius of that, so half of it, a 5-inch radius. So what this is telling me is if I want to hold dead on that animal and not aim high or low, the maximum point blank range is 220 yards with a 100-yard zero. So if that elk is within 220 yards, that bullet's going to hit within that 5-inch radius window. 5 inches high or 5 inches low. Okay. But what you can do with that is if you go over to the right side, what I did was I changed our zero. This is the energy one. So you're looking at energy on these. Let me see if I can get to that. Where'd it go? Okay, yeah. Okay, now we're back to where I want to be. So kind of backtrack a little bit. 100-yard zero. Now that point blank range is at 272. So that's 10 inches of drop. So from 272 yards and in, I can aim dead center of that elk and hit it no problem. Okay. But if we change that zero, move our zero to 200 yards, so now we sighted in at 1.8 inches high at 100. That gives us a little more leeway, high and low. So now it changes that. It shrunk that down to 5 inches, 5-inch drop at 272. So you've got about a 10 to 12 inch target zone in an elk you need to hit. So if you sight in at 100 yards, you're 0 to 100. You look at that left side over there. If you're shooting an elk 300 yards away and you're shooting in the center of that chest, that bullet is dropping 13 inches. So you're probably going to go under it. You're going to miss it. You're aiming dead center. If you had adjusted your zero to be 1.8 inches high at 100, now at 300 yards, you've only got 8 inches of drop from where you're aiming. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're aiming a little bit higher at 100. It's like you have a higher 0 to 100. You're still going to be in the kill zone at 100. And at 300, you can aim the same spot and still hit it. Whereas if you were to 0 to 100 and you're at 300, you're probably going to go under it. You're going to miss it. So.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I've always done it. And it seems like, so this, my dad taught me this one when I was little. And I never could understand why we always sighted stuff in, an inch and a half high at 100. Like it just seemed arbitrary to me. But then for some reason, the last couple of years, this whole idea of point blank range, I think somebody probably just figured out a name for it, but it seems to be, it's out there now. And so instead of having to dial your scope up when you're looking at the elk, there's 100 ways to do this. Actually dialing your scope up to shoot further, with the target turrets and that kind of stuff. For practical elk killing out in the field, this is the best way to do it. And I grew up West Kentucky. We got some deer that'd be out in the end of the bean field. I may be in a deer stand with a 30-yard shot or a 400-yard shot in the bean field later that day. And so we always did that inch and a half high at 100. Meant that you were basically still good to aim where you normally aim out to like 300 with what I was using. And it's basically the same example we're hearing here. And so there's no thinking, you know,
Right.
if the elk's at 20 yards or 300, you pull up, aim where you need to aim, and you know, as long as you put the bullet there, that's a dead elk. And it makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Right. It takes one of those thought processes out of the equation. You just aim dead on, good to go.
Yeah.
You don't have to aim high or anything. So
I personally, you know, I'm the odd man out in this group here. I've not yet killed an elk other than for work with a rifle. I grew up in Central Kentucky deer hunting, like many of our hunters probably have. You know, we're shooting 50 yards. You know, maybe I might stretch one to 100, but I seldomly ever shoot deer more than that. So this is something that this is pretty easy for me to understand, and I think it's important too. You said it was for a 30-06, but you know, you can punch this in for any, you know, whatever caliber and bullet that you get. And to me, I get the
different.
I get the question a lot from our hunters through, you know, feedback and stuff. You know, how far should I be able to hunt? Realistically, most of your, you know, especially if you're in like one of the first, like the bull rifle seasons where, you know, hopefully you'll still have some good rutting activity, you're probably going to be shooting much closer than this. But I generally tell people to be able to shoot comfortably to 300 yards. And I think that'll cover the vast majority of your at least ethical elk hunting situations here in Kentucky.
Yeah, right. And then, like I said, this chart will be different. And like you said, it'll be different for every caliber you look at. You know, you can look at that bullet drop. It's going to, between this and a 300 Win Mag is a big difference.
Yeah, and I've yet to see a box of ammo in recent history that doesn't have a muzzle velocity listed on it. Now that may not be just absolutely dead on. If you have a chronograph, obviously that's the way to get it. But I've not seen one that doesn't have the muzzle velocity on. That'll just get you. You basically need that and your scope height above the bore, and you're good to go. Those are kind of the two data inputs, and then you can kind of set around where you want your zero to be and check out your point blank range. And then, I mean, this still has to translate to the range. You got to go and verify, but this will at least get you in the ballpark. And I know a lot of people that have 100-yard range, that, you know, a lot of our state ranges on WMAs, you're limited to 100 yards. And so with this, you can know, okay, I'm actually, you know, I can already get it dialed in there where I'm, you know, 1.8 inches high at 100. My point blank range goes out to 272. And then maybe take it out to somebody's farm and get some of that long distance practice and just verification of the chart.
Yeah. And a lot of times anymore, even on the box, they'll have drops at 100, 200, 300, 400.
Yeah.
On a lot of your good quality ammo will have that anymore. So yeah, you've got a lot of information at your fingertips here to play with these numbers and figure out, you know, how far you can and can't shoot. The other thing you can look at with these charts is looking at energy. That's the big thing. You know, Joe kind of hit on that. Generally, with whitetails, you want around 1,500 foot-pounds of energy, and you'll see that you'll see it on the right-hand side here. Here's your energy levels. So this is a 165 going 28-30 and a 30-06 on the left. On the right, you've got the same bullet in a 300 Win Mag going 3,050. Okay, so here's your big difference in how far you can shoot. All right, for whitetails, you want about 1,500 foot-pounds. Elk, you probably want near 2,000 foot-pounds. A lot more energy. So if you look at this chart, we get below 2,000 foot-pounds at 220 yards. So right there is about as far as you want to shoot. Maybe push it to 250 if it's a cow. You're still up there pretty good. But look over here at the 300 Win Mag chart on the right. You're not dropping below 2,000 until you get to 350 now. So that's your big difference in caliber and rifle selection. You know, that 30-06 is a great gun. You know, a lot of animals have been harsh with the 30-06, but you're going to see real quick, there's its limitation, 250 yards. You shouldn't shoot any farther than that with a 30-06 with that bullet and that speed. And that gets you close to where your point blank zero is too, we were talking about. But that 300 Win Mag lets you stretch it out a little bit farther if you're capable of making that 350 yard shot. So, and a lot of times this is printed on the box too. It'll have, your yardage, your drop, and then the energy of that cartridge. So that's one really big thing to pay attention to is the energy of that rifle you're shooting. All right, so now we're going to kind of get into the end of this. So making your shot. We talked about know your rifle and know your limitations. We talked just now how far you can shoot with the energy requirement. If you can or can't shoot off of sticks, or how far you can shoot. Know that before you get here. One big thing we've ran into over the years is, of course, one of the big rules of gun safety: know your target and what's beyond it. A lot of times you're going to see elk in a group. There's going to be, maybe there's 10, maybe there's 20 of them. All right. If there's a bull lined up here and there's a cow right behind it, and you're shooting a 300 Win Mag, there's a chance you're going to go through that bull and hit that cow. And it's happened a lot over the years. We've had 2 bulls shot. We've had bulls with multiple cows shot. There's a good chance that bull's going to go through it. And in the heat of the moment, it's you get tunnel vision. There's that bull I want. I'm going to shoot him. You don't realize there's 3 cows standing behind him. And now you've shot a bull and a cow, and you're going to get probably a little visit from someone that you don't want to visit from. Get a ticket. So know that in the heat of the moment. Maybe have your buddy, hey man, hold on. Just wait a minute. So, and that gets to the third point. Have somebody there with you to help you. Have them watch the elk. All right, I'm going to shoot the third one from the right, the cow facing this direction, and have them watch it. And because this is going to come up later. When you shoot, kind of getting one of our later points here, a lot of times you shoot an elk, it won't move. You won't know you've hit it at all. It'll just stand there looking around, especially a bull in rut. He doesn't care. That doesn't register. And if there's 2 bulls there and they're mingling and moving around, you may shoot that bull. There's no reaction at all. And now they move and you're like, oh, no, which one did I shoot at? I can't remember. Now you may shoot 2 bulls now. So have a buddy with you. Say, all right, there's the one you shot. He's over here. No, it's not that one. It's this one. That's a big thing. You may have to shoot, even though you shoot it right in the lungs. You may have to shoot that thing 3 or 4 times before it ever falls over. Shot placement is a big thing. We're going to show some pictures here in a minute. You guys kind of showed that during the archery presentation of how elk are laid out. Where to place that, where to put that shot. We'll show that here in a second. But know your target. Know what's behind it. Know that bullet may go through. You're probably going to have to shoot it again. Kind of my rule of thumb is shoot the same animal. Shoot it until either you're out of ammo or it's on the ground not moving. That's my rule. So, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
So, I want to talk a little bit more about having someone watch the elk you shoot at, identify what's behind it. We touched on it in the bull hunting, and yes, it's pretty important. But where we see the majority of these issues, at least that are reported to me, is during the cow season. We typically have, we see animals in a little bigger groups than we do, in the bull season. And depending on the weather, they might actually be out in the open a little more, feeding larger herd sizes. It's really easy, especially if there are multiple people, shooting at animals together, to mess up and shoot multiple cows. I mean, at least with a bull, you're going to be able to identify antlers or something like that. The cow hunting, we've had hunters shoot multiple cows thinking that they were shooting at the one they just shot. It's a big problem, or it has the potential to be a big problem for you if you're not careful. The other one, especially for cow hunting, be wary of the spikes. We get 3 or 4 or 5 spikes every year. Somebody thinks they're shooting at a cow the big cow in the group are, they might, they take off running, they shoot a spike, or they just don't pay attention. That's one of the biggest areas I see that you have the potential to get yourself in trouble for. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think the restitution cost on an elk is upwards of $2,000. So for sure, pay attention to what you're doing in those hunting situations. Like we've talked about and we will in a minute too, when your shot placement, and we did with the archery hunt, like it's better if you can't make that clean ethical shot to just let them move on, try to get back on them, or wait. It can be a big issue for you.
Yeah. And you reminded me of something that happened. This was years ago, but there was a guy that shot 4 cows one day. There was a group of them. They were going across the road on a strip job. Him and his buddy were there. He shot. Cow didn't react. His buddy said, "Oh, you missed it. Shoot another one." Well, they rinsed and repeated that 4 times. He walks around the hill. There's 4 elk laying there dead in the road. So it's really important to know that a lot of times they will not react, and you've got to identify which one you shot at if you're going to do a repeat shot for a follow-up shot. So really got to pay attention to that stuff, because they're not like whitetails. They don't jump and kick or fall over. They may just stand there. Just be real careful with it. All right, so here's some pictures of elk vitals. You probably saw these in the archery talk, but it kind of shows you the layout of the vital area of an elk. The big thing that we've seen with archery and with firearm hunters is you don't want to shoot too high. If you shoot high in that first shot there, top left, you're going to you may hit it in the spine and knock it down, but it's not a good ethical shot. Or you may just hit meat and it'll bleed, but you'll probably never find it. So you want to get down kind of the lower 2/3 of that body cavity, right, just like with a deer, straight up from the front leg. But all these are fine shots with a rifle. Archery is a little bit different. Some of the shots you can't take with a bow that you can with a rifle, but just kind of know where the proper ethical shots are for an elk. So this gives you an idea of the structure of an elk and where to shoot. And basically if you go back to midline, you're way too far back. You're going to be in the liver or in one of the stomachs, and that's not going to be a good day. Stay up in this front shoulder area, and kind of that lower third. And their heart lays pretty low in their chest. As big as they are, it does hang pretty low. So, all right. So some final thoughts. Like I said, be comfortable with your equipment before you come down. Make sure you're the one that shot your gun. You know your limitations. You know your equipment. Double check your zero and all your screws, like we talked about at the beginning. Grab one of those fat wrenches before you come down. Check your scope rings. Check your action screws. When you get down here, double check them again. Go shoot your rifle at 100 yards. A lot of times down here, these, if you're on a WMA down here, most of these are old strip mines, and you can find good open spots. You can shoot 300-400 yards if you want to practice a little bit. That's not a problem. And one thing I kind of add in here is keep your gear in one spot if you can. Don't have stuff scattered all over the place. Well, I've got my gun in the case and my rangefinder's in that bag, and my knife's over here, and my cleaning kit's over there. Put it all in one spot so you don't forget it. Maybe throw it in your backpack. You get an extra bag that goes in your backpack that holds all that gear. Take that field cleaning kit. You have a little accident, or if it rains, you get some mud in your barrel, you get water in your scope, water in the action. Clean that rifle in every day, and run that bore scope, or run the bore cleaner through the bore when you get back to camp. Wipe your rifle down so you don't get rust on it. Clean your lenses on your scope if you need to. You don't want to go out the next morning, see the bull of a lifetime, flip that scope cap up and it's full of dust, or it's full of water, and you can't see 5 feet in front of you. So that's just some kind of quick things I was thinking to kind of double check once you get down here and make sure everything is still good to go.
Don't use gun oil. Don't use the same stuff you're wiping your rifle down to clean that scope with.
No.
I've seen people make the mistake and just say, don't do it.
Yeah.
All right, so Dan could have easily done, you know, in one of these hour webinars on each single bullet point on the last every slide you've looked at, without a doubt. So I know for him, he's probably been pulling the reins back the whole time just to keep it general. Be sure if you've got specific questions or want to dig into any one of these deeper, shout at one of us, especially Dan, and he's got the answers. So one thing that I wanted to end on this, and one of my number one questions that I get that's gun related is, I've got a deer rifle. Can I use it for elk? Just in general. And, you know, thinking back to, you know, probably the majority of the drawn elk hunters this year, they're probably deer hunters. They probably killed deer. They probably got a deer rifle. Whatever that might be, they probably got a deer rifle. So, and I'm going to ask this to Dan while we got him here. So just like, if you've got a common deer rifle, you know, that meets the legal requirements, so 270 or larger bullet diameter, that'd be something like, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking 308, 7mm 08, 30-06, 270. If you've got one of those four or something in between, one of the other common ones, what's your best way to get that thing lined up to be able to go and take an elk? All those rifles have taken elk and can take elk, but what's the best way to get them to where you can use that gun you're comfortable with, not have to go out and buy you a brand new setup, take that gun you're comfortable with and harvest an elk?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would do. Use what you're comfortable with. You know, the old deer rifle you've used for 20 years that shoots straight and works great. You know, check all your screws, make sure everything's tight, find some good ammo for it. You know, get out and shoot that ammo, is more than likely you haven't shot that kind through it before. You know, give that gun a pretty decent cleaning. Make sure, you know, everything's functioning right. Make sure the safety's working, the bolt's working. You know, there's not a gob of dirt back in the chamber somewhere. You know, clean your equipment, keep it running good, just like you would your car. You know, you got to change oil in your car, and you clean it every now and then. So clean that gun up and get it going. Get out and get comfortable with it. You know.
Yeah, and I think just in having conversation with this, folks, I mean, if you're going to take something like a 308 or 7mm 08 or an 06 or a 270, it goes back exactly to your ballistics chart example. Basically, the best thing you can do is just back that range down. Stay in the range that those calibers are effective for.
Right.
And my second biggest thing, and we hit on this at the beginning, is just the bullet selection. Get, you know, an elk bullet in any one of these four calibers will kill an elk. Might not kill an elk as far as a 7mm or 300 Win Mag, but they will kill an elk if done right. So it's very possible.
Yeah, and a lot of this too is really, a lot of this boils down to shot placement. You know, if you can't hit it where it needs to be hit, you're going to have problems. You know, if you're dead on at 100 and man, you're comfortable with that, you have no trouble shooting an elk at 100 yards with any of the legal calibers will work. You know, if you're hitting it in the rear end or in the guts or in the meat part of the neck, you're going to have problems. But if you can put that bullet where it needs to be, it's going to work. It's going to hold together, and it's going to harvest that elk. So, you know, that's the big thing too. And that boils down to, you know, using some of these field expedient methods of shooting sticks and bipods and, you know, shooting off of a rock. You know, you should never really shoot offhanded. You shouldn't have to do that. But if you're using these field methods of shooting and you know, like I said, you put that bullet where it needs to go, it's more than likely going to do its job, and you're going to have a good time.
Yeah. Awesome. So anybody got anything else? If not, we'll get this thing rounded out.
I do have one minor thing. I've gotten a lot of questions that I get to are kind of similar to what you just said. It's, well, I've got a 270 or I've got a 30-06 or whatever, which one should I take? And I always just defer to them. I say, which one can you shoot better? Which one are you most comfortable with? I don't think that you necessarily have to take the biggest, baddest rifle you got or borrow to do it. I mean, shot placement, you're fine. But I always stress to people to bring what you're comfortable with, what you're best at. And I've actually gotten quite a few questions and comments about packs since the last one. A shooting pack or backpack makes for a fine rest as well. So you may be able to cut down on some of your stuff depending on the terrain and vegetation you're in. But I've shot several animals off my hunting bag, and something I would encourage people to talk about too, or think about when they're loading everything up.
Yeah.
But
Especially
thanks,
it's kinda
Dave.
like-
I learned a lot.
It's kind of like a frame pack too. I mean, you've got a pretty stable frame you can put that gun on to get a good rest on it. So yeah, it's a good thing to bring up.
Awesome. Yeah. And I mean, this is kind of stuff that I always think about. And I always think about this in terms of stacking the odds in my favor. The more you shoot, the better, just something as small as torquing the screws on your scope ring puts the odds in your favor in some minute little amount, and all that stuff adds up. So, get out this summer, shoot your gun, get better with your gun. I always kind of think about these big hunting trips as an opportunity to get better with that gun. You might use it every year for deer, but this is just an excuse to get out there, burn some powder, and get dialed in better. And so just one reminder before we close out. So we're about 2 weeks away from the July 2nd area draw deadline. So get in my profile, get your picks in there for the units or the regulated areas. If you don't go in there and do that, you're going to just get a random unit, which you may or may not want. So be sure to go in there. Check out episode 3 of this webinar. It's been a while. It's been a couple of weeks ago since we did that one. If you're rusty on things, on how the mock profile system works, check that out. That'll walk you through everything you need to know. If you've got other questions, holler at me, Joe, or Dan, and I'm going to share our contact info. And so, Dan, thanks for coming on and letting us pick your brain a little bit about this topic. So we always appreciate it. And basically, we'll see you next week. We're not sure what the topic's going to be yet, but that's the way we've gotten pretty busy here the last little bit. So we're kind of running these things down as we can, but we'll be back and see you next week.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.